This is one of the few impeachment inquiries in the history of our country. It goes to the core of whether the president abused his office to seek political help in his re-election campaign, and did so to the detriment of our nation's security.
A poll that just came out where I'm up massively with independent voters. I don't know if it's this or because of the hoax, that's going on with Nancy Pelosi and her friend Adam Schiff. He's another beauty.
Did so by effectively coercing a country that has been invaded by Russia to investigate a rival and condition the relationship between this country and that country on whether they were willing to play ball. That is the gravamen of the issues that we are investigating, that this impeachment inquiry is looking into. It is hard to imagine a set of facts more damaging to our national security and our standing in the world, but also more of a fundamental breach of the president's oath of office. The American people have the right to know if the president is acting in their interests, in the nation's interests, with an eye towards our national security, and not in his narrow personal political interests. They have a right to know. Indeed, the American people have a need to know. And through this impeachment inquiry, we are determined to find the answers. Thank you.
He got caught lying all over the place. He doesn't know what to do. He's a mess. Right now he's a mess. And everybody knows it. Just all you have to do is a little good reporting. You'll see he's a total mess because he got caught.
It's based on the unfair and partisan process that Mr. Schiff has been running. When you think about what the Democrats are trying to do, impeach the President of the United States 13 months prior to an election based on an anonymous whistleblower with no firsthand knowledge who has a bias against the President. And the guy running the process, Chairman Schiff, didn't even tell us that he had met with the whistleblower prior to the whistleblower filing the complaint. Adam Schiff didn't tell us that the way he treated Ambassador Sondland last week in this, Ambassador Volker in this interview last week, that treatment is the reason why the administration and the State Department said we're not going to subject Ambassador Sondland to the same treatment. And look, we were actually looking forward to hearing from Ambassador Sondland. We thought he was going to reinforce exactly what Ambassador Volker told us last week. But again, unfortunately, when you have a Speaker of the House who says we need to strike while the iron's hot, when you have a chairman of the committee who is so biased against this president that he wouldn't even tell us that his staff had met with the whistleblower prior to the whistleblower filing the complaint. And frankly, this is a pattern with Mr. Schiff. He did the same thing, if you remember, the first big hearing the Democrats did this Congress, Michael Cohen. He didn't tell us that his staff had met with Mr. Cohen 4 hours prior to Mr. Cohen testifying. He didn't tell us that last summer he had met with Mr. Simpson out in Colorado, palling around with the guy with Fusion GPS. So this is a pattern. Like I said, we were hoping to hear from the ambassador today, but we understand exactly why the administration, exactly why the State Department has chosen to say, look, if it's going to be this kind of process, if you're going to selectively leak text messages, 67 pages of text messages we had, they take a handful and release to all of you, and not give the full context and not release the transcript, we understand why they made this decision at this moment.
Transparency. There's an argument. No, hold on a second. There's an argument in favor of cherry-picking selective releases of texts. There's an argument in favor of only telling the American public what is best in the interests of wanting to take down a sitting president. Maybe you should ask what was said inside of Volker's deposition during his transcribed interview with regards to Adam Schiff's fairy tale quid pro quo charge that aid from the United States to Ukraine was being linked to an investigation into the Bidens. Why don't you ask, what did Ambassador Volker say about that? That's a great question. I'm glad that you asked that question. And I'll tell you the reason why that question was so important for you to ask is for many things, because he was in this room for several hours. And during several hours of testimony, he talked about how President Zelensky had no idea that there was a hold-on aid at the time of the July 25th call. Ambassador Volker testified about how the readouts of the phone call that was made to him, that there was nothing in the readouts about there being a hold on U.S. aid or a quid pro quo. Or Ambassador Volker testified, this is what the transcribed interview would tell you if you asked this question. I'm glad that we're having this discussion. The next day, Ambassador Volker meets with President Zelensky. And in that meeting, there is no reference to a quid pro quo, or President Zelensky having any idea that there was a hold on aid, or over the course of Ambassador Volker's next several weeks engaging with Ukraine. Ukraine makes no reference to there being a hold on aid or there being a quid pro quo. And by the way, you know what else Ambassador Volker testified to? This entire time the aid was getting released. It was going to get released. And guess what happened? The aid got released. And you know what didn't have to happen? There was no new investigation that had to get created. This whole thing is a fairy tale. Adam Schiff is misleading you, and you're playing along with it. Many of you are, and the American public is then getting deceived. When Adam Schiff said, for example, that President Trump was asking President Zelensky to manufacture dirt on the Bidens, you know what Ambassador Volker testified to? That was absolutely untrue. Now that's what we would call an inconvenient fact for the narrative. You know what else Adam Schiff has been saying to you and the American public that was not true? That he had no contact with the whistleblower. He'd like to, but he didn't have any contact. He lied. You know what else he lied about? When he gave his opening statement from the acting director of national intelligence as to what was in front of the world as far as what the transcribed interview said. Now going back to Ambassador Volker's transcribed interview and a process, we were here ready to do our part. If anyone is going to testify behind those closed doors, we're going to make sure that we're there to ensure that the other 99% of the story is being told. Because guess what? If we weren't there last Thursday, you would have no idea of everything that Ambassador Volker said to obliterate Adam Schiff's fairy tale quid pro quo charge. You would have no idea. So we're here. Now, as far as the administration goes, if they don't want to send Ambassador Sondland here, because this is a kangaroo court, because there has not been a vote to launch an impeachment inquiry, because the minority does not have any rights for subpoenas, because the president doesn't have the right to have counsel present to ask questions, for subpoena power, to present evidence. This entire thing is a political charade, is a clown show. We're here, we're ready for whoever's going to be testifying in the other room, but we have to be here because if we're not, Adam Schiff sure as heck is not going to tell you. Because all he has to do is right now release that transcribed interview, because he won't, because it destroys his narrative. It undercuts it, it blows it up. That's what we heard over the course of several hours. And by the way, Jerry Connolly comes on to, Aaron Burnett's show on CNN at 7 o'clock on Thursday, and they have a back and forth. They play a clip from Jim Jordan, they play a clip from me, where they're basically saying, Jerry Connolly, you didn't hear anything of what Jim Jordan and Lee Zeldin says that they heard, right? And they have this back and forth, basically dumbing down their audience. And what isn't pointed out in that back and forth is that Jerry Connolly was the last person to show up. He's the first one to leave instantly. He wasn't there for any of it. So what's important is that we are here, and we can answer any question you want as far as what Ambassador Volker testified to, credibly, exceptionally, professionally, but you're not asking any of the most important questions. Some of you are, but many of you aren't asking the most important questions, such as, what did you hear last Thursday that we don't yet know about? Adam Schiff won't answer, but he should. He should release the transcript. One other thing that's really important to point out is that another show put up on Sunday, one of the texts from Bill Taylor. That show then did not follow that text with the response that absolutely says unequivocally that there is no quid pro quo. Furthermore, what that show did not say after that is the context from Ambassador Volker's transcript with regards to Bill Taylor's text. And you would then know if we all had the transcribed interview in front of us, but we'll tell you now, it's been out there in the public. He said it because he read a Politico story. And he wanted to get the aid to Ukraine released. He saw a Politico story and he was concerned, and then he was corrected. But why is it that the coverage is only going to show Bill Taylor's text and not show the response correcting it and not provide any context whatsoever? You know why I'm pissed as I stand here? Because right now, this Congress, our country, all across the entire country, there are people watching this who are disgusted with how 2019 has gone. That all of their priorities right now, why are we not working together to pass USMCA next week? We know that it'll grow jobs, increase investment in the United States. that it would increase GDP? Why are we not talking about USMCA? Why aren't we working on a bipartisan basis to lower prescription drug costs? Why are we not working together on a bipartisan process in order to pass all of these different priorities that are really important to our constituents, Republicans and Democrats, conservatives, liberals? It's all to appease an enraged liberal activist base, insisting on resisting, impeaching, opposing, and obstructing everything and anything. We are all, as a country, being held hostage by a few members of Congress who have leveraged congressional primaries against Democratic leadership and committee chairs. They've instilled fear on the part of their colleagues in their own conference. And them and their activist base is preventing us from standing here for all of us to be able to spend 100% of our energy working together in order to pass bipartisan important priorities for our country. So if we sound like we're pissed as we stand here, it's because we are. The American people are getting screwed by an enraged liberal activist base demanding impeachment. They don't even care what the crime is. They don't care what the facts are. They don't care what the evidence is. I think it's also important to point out that you all know, the American public all knows now more than the whistleblower does. So, this whole thing about what does the whistleblower know? We're telling you, they now know less than what you all know. So we should be talking about what we know now and how to go forward. Talking about kangaroo court, you know what else Jim Jordan pointed out when we were here a few days ago? Was how when we showed up on Thursday, Adam Schiff started by the ground rules was that this was going to be a staff-led transcribed interview. And then it wasn't until Jim Jordan pushed back that Adam Schiff reluctantly said that he would allow members to ask questions. But it was discouraged. He was strongly discouraging members to ask questions. And by the way,
until it went so bad for Adam Schiff that he jumped in for 25 minutes and voices cracking when they start to look at this. Why? Because Ambassador Volker was not giving them the answers that they were leading Ambassador Volker to conclude. I can tell you that this is nothing more than, Adam Schiff talked about 4 acts. You know what? There are 4 acts. And the first, second, third, and fourth act already has reached a conclusion for Adam Schiff. Let the American people decide what the final act will be, because ultimately, when the truth comes out, you will see that this president did not hold aid to try to influence a foreign country to do anything.
Well, first of all, the impeachment inquiry is a scam. The conversation that I had with the Ukrainian president, Zelensky, was a very good it was a very cordial, very good conversation. The mistake they made, the opponents, the opposition, the Democrats, the radical left, deep state, whatever you want to call them, they came out with a whistleblower report before they saw the conversation. Had they waited one day, Nancy Pelosi wouldn't have made a fool out of herself, and she would have been able to say what I said, because when she saw it, she said, this is not what the whistleblower said. I had a very, very congenial, nice conversation with a man that I like, and he ran on corruption. Because, as you know, Ukraine is known as a very corrupt country, one of the most in the world, shockingly, because I know Ukrainian people. It's surprising to me, but it's known as one of the most corrupt countries. And under the past leadership, it was having a lot of difficulty. This gentleman, the current president, the new president, ran on the basis of anti-corruption. As you know, I think it was his single biggest thing. And we had a great conversation. But it wasn't reported that way. The only reason I would have released a letter, because I think it's terrible to have to release a letter that you have with the leader of a country. I think that's a terrible precedent. But the whistleblower report, or whatever the news was so off. It was so horrible. I said, I never said that. I said, let me see it. We have a stenographer report. We have a very, very word-for-word report of what I said. I released it. And almost everybody that read it said it's either perfect or really very good. But it's a very normal, nice conversation. And when you see that the president of Ukraine, President Zelensky, said there was no pressure put on me whatsoever. His spokesman came out 2 days ago, said there was absolutely no pressure put on the president. I didn't tell him to say that. There was no pressure put on. All you have to do is read the report. The problem is I released it a day after they had already made their big statements. And And again, it's a big scam. And I think Adam Schiff should be investigated for what he did. He took to the great chamber, Congress, and he made a speech. And his speech was a fraud. Everything he said was a fraud. He went out as though I wrote it. He defrauded the American people. He defrauded Congress. He defrauded himself and his family. He made a speech with a horrible speech. I said, what's going on here? I think he's having some kind of a breakdown, because he got up and made a speech that bore no relationship to what the conversation was. And I'll tell you, a lot of people heard that speech, and a lot of people thought that's what I said because they heard his speech, because they're not going to read a 3 or 4 page conversation. They don't have access to it. But I thought it was I thought it was a terrible thing, where he's going up, speaking as the President of the United States, saying things that I never said. And the meaning was horrible, and the whole thought was horrible. And then the whistleblower, he did, through his committee, through himself, he met with the whistleblower. They never said that. They never talked about it. And Nancy Pelosi knew all of this stuff. I mean, she's as guilty as he is, because she knew all that. She knew everything about it, and she didn't do anything about it. And I'll tell you what, they should really be looked at very strongly, because what they did is unthinkable. What they did to this country is unthinkable. And it's lucky that I'm the president, because I guess, I don't know what, a lot of people said very few people could handle it. I sort of thrive on it. You know why? Because it's so important that we get to the bottom. We went through the whole Mueller scam, 2.5 years. We went through that, and I had 3-4 days where it was like over. And then I'm walking into the United Nations, and they released it as I'm walking in, Mr. Ambassador. I'm walking in. I'm going to meet with, I won't name, but one of the top leaders of the world. And I see up on the screen, and people start screaming about this scam called impeachment. You can't impeach a president for doing a great job. You can't impeach a president for having the lowest and best unemployment numbers that we've had in 51 years. You can't impeach a president for tax cuts and regulation cuts and creating, and even the ambassador would say, the strongest economy in the world. We have the strongest economy in the world. This is a scam. And the people are wise to it. And that's why my polls went up. I think they said 17 points in the last 2 or 3 days. I've never had that one. I've never had that one. So I think it's very sad for our country. I think it makes it harder to do my job. But I do my job, and I do it better than anybody's done it.